FMC Fast Chat takes you inside the news so you can be in the know in 30 minutes. Hosted by Fair Media Council CEO and Executive Director Jaci Clement, Fast Chat features notables in news, media, and business.
Hi, this is Jaci Clement of the Fair Media Council. Thank you for joining us for this episode of FMC Fast Chat. This is part of a series we're doing that focuses on local news across America. And we're doing it by talking directly to the people who are working in local news. So today's episode, we take you to Alaska to talk with Deanna Haecker, who's the editor of the Nome Nugget, which is Alaska's oldest newspaper. So Deanna, first, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
So I'm thinking for those of us like me who have never been to Alaska, what is it like to live there? What do people do? How many people are in Nome?
We have a population of about 3,500 residents here in Nome. And when we talk about Alaska is huge. Yeah. So Southeast is different from where we are. For example, we're in closer to the Arctic. And right now, there's still sea ice in front of Nome. So there's, we're still icebound. Snow on the ground. We still have below freezing temperatures now here on May 4th. And it's a place where you can only get to by airplane. We're not on the road system. So we're a very rural region, even in a rural state. So we have a constituency in our newspaper that includes villages around us, 15 communities that are then even further rural, and they also can only be reached by bush plane and snow machines sometimes. So the trails are kind of going down these days because the snow is melting pretty fast. But we had huge amounts of snow, so weather plays a huge part in our everyday life and how we truck along doing business, basically.
Yeah.
So it's a place where we have a diverse population here of Inupiaq, Siberian Yupik, and Central Yupik people in Nome. Mm-hmm. And further up north, it's more the Inupiaq people on the island of St. Lawrence Island. That's the Siberian Yupik culture. And then further south of us, it's predominantly Yupik and Inupiaq.
Okay.
So we have distinct cultures and distinct languages. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, other people who come here and have settled in Nome since 1900 when it first became a city.
Okay, all right. And when did the Nome Nugget start publishing?
That's $1 million question. Officially recognized by the Alaska State Library is about 1900.
Okay.
There are claims of 1897, but everybody kind of agrees on 1900. So we're 123 years old now.
Okay, all right. Now, as you were describing Nome, I just want to ask you two things that just popped into my mind. One, I'm wondering, what happens in times of emergency, like to get to a hospital, or if you need medical attention, what do you do? And two, how do you just get groceries? Is that difficult?
Sometimes. So there's a health corporation here that is established by the Indian Health Service, and that is owned by 20 tribes in our region here. So there's some healthcare service, but not. So basically, it's a trauma hospital. If you get injured or hurt, that's where you go, and then from there on out, you'll be medevac in an emergency by a plane to Anchorage, which is about 600 air miles away from us, about 1,000 land miles. Okay. And it is also, it's basically you get medevac.
I see.
For other maintenance services, we have a dentist. We have two eye doctors in addition, and we have, like I said, that these for non-emergencies, there's doctors in the hospital that
Okay.
will treat you. So it's not that bad, but like pregnant ladies, they are encouraged to, go to Anchorage and have their baby,
Okay.
because there's no one here who can administer anesthesia. So
Okay.
it's only, you get patched up and then off you go on a medevac.
I see. Okay. And what
So
about just general shopping, groceries, food?
the groceries, there are 2 stores in town here, and prices are, since everything has to be brought in here by airplane or barge,
Okay.
it's transportation is very expensive, especially since the gas prices went up, and
Yeah.
that is something I'll talk about later, the gas prices.
Okay.
So the stores, they're pretty well stocked, there are no complaints. But if we have weather events, or if the airport the runway is being fixed up and there's weather at the same time, if we have delays of planes coming in beyond 4 days, the shelves go bare.
I
But
see.
but we
Mhm.
have a culture here that's basically a mixed cash and subsistence economy,
Okay.
where people go out and hunt moose. Of course, it's all regulated, but there's a very thriving subsistence culture going on, of people harvesting fish in the summertime, salmon, and
Okay.
then marine mammals. That's traditional foods here, uh,
Mhm.
and and because in the villages the stores are really uh, horrendously expensive, the items they sell there, and they're not very wholesome foods.
Okay.
So it's a common thing where people go out and hunt whatever is in season and supplement their diet with, good wholesome wild foods.
I see.
The berries in the summer, you put them away, freeze them. So yeah, they're, you have both, but yes, it gets kind of slim pickings, especially fresh produce,
Okay.
when there are storms and the planes can't come in.
I see. Okay. So how did you end up there? Because you're not originally from the area.
No, I came here from Hawaii,
Mhm.
and I met my husband here, who was a dog musher, and you know, sled dogs don't do so great in Hawaii, and here I am.
I
Yep.
see.
So
And
we have a kennel. My husband, he's actually working in the advertising department. He's running the business side of the Nome Nugget, and I am the editorial department head here, with the editor, and just running the newsroom.
okay. All right. So let's talk about the newspaper. Are you the only newspaper for the area that you serve?
Yes.
And
But
have you always been the only one?
no, we have not. So the Nome Nugget went through several iterations since 1900,
Okay.
uh, from the Nome Chronicle to the semi-weekly to the tri-weekly to the daily, to back the tri-weekly to the Nome Nugget, then to the daily back, and so there were several iterations, but there was always a consistent ownership. Basically, there were other newspapers
Okay.
that came and went, but we're the last one standing, and we have been had no interruption since 1900, as far as I know. I think there was in 1938, there was a gap, but I'm not sure what happened.
Mhm.
But since then, we went from a daily to a tri-weekly to a semi-weekly, and now back to a weekly.
Okay.
And there was a competitor in the early 90s, and that was not very long around, the Bering Strait record.
Okay.
That was really not. long-lived.
Okay.
And so ever since then, we are the only newspaper in an area that is huge. The entire Seward Peninsula plus part of Norton Sound down to the Yukon Delta.
Okay.
So it's an area of almost, I think it's bigger than Delaware. It's
Okay.
huge.
Yeah.
And so we're serving them as best as we can with stories that we pick out. No, we don't pick them out. We report the news on what is happening in our ecosystem, which is undergoing just a dramatic change through climate change. And then, of course, we are Alaska's neighbor to Russia, and we're the closest to Russia, the Bering Strait region. And so, we report on whatever's going on, in terms of relationships, in terms of,
Yeah.
people running away from Russia and ending up in our area here. So, we have a lot of things to report on.
Okay. So in addition to weather and climate change, what are the other big issues for the people living there?
Of course, city government.
Okay.
That's all. Like, we doggedly go to pretty much every meeting that the city government controls, like council meetings, planning commission, port commission, school boards, utilities meetings, and so on. So that is like we just do that because it needs to be done.
Yeah.
So we try to have a report in each one of those meetings, and then we're having, of course, we're doing crimes in court, education reporting. A big one is the sports, of course, high school sports. And they are quite interesting because in addition to, the regular basketball and volleyball, and we have skiing, and we also have Nome Native Youth Olympics. It's called NYO Games. Those are games that are very Arctic specific, from, the native population. And those games are mimicking some games that relate to hunting out on the sea ice, and
I see.
just they're very super athletic, and it's they're awesome to watch. So we have very, very unique, and of course we have dog mushing. So Nome is the end of the Iditarod Trail sled dog race. That's a 1,000-mile dog race from Willow to Nome, and we're the end point of it. So that's always very exciting when the dogs come in. And
Now, when is Iditarod season for you? March. All right. And I imagine you're extremely busy then, news-wise, covering that.
Yep. And that's that's the fun part. That's like, of course, that makes it even more fun because we're kind of being dog mushers ourselves.
Okay.
We see things with different eyes than just a regular reporter who doesn't really know what they're looking at. And, we have like a more expert set of eyes on things.
I see. Can you give me an idea how climate change has changed the Iditarod from what you see there?
Yeah. Well, we see that breakup is happening earlier, and mushers have to contend with more like crazy storms at the end of the race.
Oh, okay.
And also and more precipitation, and just it makes it warmer for dogs to run. So a lot of mushers time it so that they rest their dogs in the heat of the day, and they prefer to run early morning, early evening, and then at night.
I see.
So that the dogs don't overheat. It's just easier for the animals to run. It's not that hot.
I see.
So hot is like, yeah.
Yeah.
We consider like 20 degrees. That's pretty hot. Anyway, yeah, it's easier when they can run in the cool of the night. But yeah, so we other topics for the Nome Nugget are we have very we have a Arctic port that is about to be built here,
Okay.
and we have mining issues and mining proposals that we cover, big time mines that are proposed to be put in here next to Nome. We have the ecological disaster kind of hitting us through climate change with harmful algal blooms, different fish distributions, and also the avian flu, the avian influenza that's going now. It's rampant worldwide.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of big issues that are complex and not easy to write about, like more sciencey stuff.
Yeah.
Which is really hard to convey, because sometimes we have huge stories that break, like about things that we didn't even know are a thing. Like, for example, there was a few years ago, scientists came back from a science cruise, and they said they couldn't find the cold pool, and we're like, what the heck is the cold pool? Never heard of it. So it's a very complex thing where basically cold water changes the salinity and kind of brings down a curtain, so that certain fish, they're like, that's too cold for me, I'm not going there.
Oh, okay.
Turned away. So when the scientists couldn't find that cold pool anymore, there was a bigger fish distribution of fish that we usually didn't see here suddenly coming our way, and of course eating away everything that our native or the crabs or whatever else is feeding on. Usually there was a whole shift in what's going on in the ocean because of the lack of the cold pool, and then the lack of the sea ice. Well, who knew that in the springtime under the sea ice is a whole it's like a pasture of plankton or algae, and that is eaten up by the zooplankton, and then the zooplankton feeds other fish. So without the sea ice, we don't have the pasture, and then now everybody goes hungry because the zooplankton is not there.
Wow.
So there's like a lot of things that scientists knew and took it for granted, and we are just learning as we find out that we need that stuff, and that's not here anymore. So we keep track of that here from scientists, all these really earth-shaking news items that are very complex to write about, and thus don't really make big waves, unlike other stories that are more simple and they go viral. And I'm constantly wondering why we're breaking news that are really significant, and people just like other news outlets don't really understand what we're talking about and don't pick up on it. And I'm like, come on, you got to follow up on that at least.
Now, would you say that's always been an issue? Or, I mean, we focus a lot on the cuts to hyperlocal, but the reality is national news has let people go. Associated Press isn't staffed the way it used to be. So, we see lots of holes happening on different levels everywhere. So from your perspective, have you seen those holes growing, or you've always had this issue because of where you are?
So we just came back from Alaska Press Club week. We every end of April, the Alaska Press Club organizes a conference, and they give out their awards. And guess what? We just won Best Weekly for
Congratulations.
this year, last year too, but this year Press Club was in person again. So anyway, it was nice. So I think Alaska is doing okay on journalists.
Okay.
Well, we're so used to making do with the bare minimum that, if there's a live body sitting in a radio station, that's awesome. We're like,
Yeah.
good for
Yes.
you. But newspapers, they're far in between, that's for sure. So I think when I talk about the larger news outlets not paying attention to like these big issues, is I have no idea, because they do have resources that we don't have.
Mhm.
Um, so I really I can only explain that with the fact that those are really complex issues,
Okay.
and they don't really impact those people in the lower 48 or in urban Alaska as much as they impact our subsistence cultures here, right here, who go hungry. If the sea ice doesn't come with a walrus, so usually it's like a conveyor belt where in the springtime, the ice melting or the ice moving north from the Russian side is like a conveyor belt bringing the walrus with them as they migrate up north.
Okay.
And if that doesn't happen, there are certain communities who are specializing in walrus hunting, and they go hungry if they cannot get their catch in for the year.
Okay.
So yeah, they do care, and yeah, we explain why this is happening and
Yeah.
what's going on. We have like a sea ice outlook. We have a column in our paper every week that keeps an eye on climate, on the weather, summarizes weather events, and so
Hmm.
that's really, really important for us.
Okay.
Storms. Last year we had in September a 100-year storm that kind of made national news. Murbach, who that just basically devastated several communities here and just washed away the subsistence cabins and racks, like fish racks where fish is hung to dry. And
Mhm.
um, yeah, that was quite horrible.
Wow.
Yep, yep.
Okay. Now tell me a little bit about, talking to people across the country. There's always one or two issues that seem to be an issue everywhere, no matter where I speak to people. One of which is, and tell me if it's an issue for you or not, or how this factors in, affordable housing
Mhm.
and taxes.
Yeah, taxes. Okay, so first to taxes. I just last night came out of the Board of Equalization meeting here in Nome. The assessment letters went out, assessments went up for a good reason. Um, Everyone is up in arms, but yeah. So anyway, this will all be solved because the council probably is not going to have this high mill rate as they have now. So anyway, taxes, yeah. Well, this area is a very economically deprived area, so um yeah, there's a high poverty rate.
Okay.
Um, the taxes are like, well, number one, Alaska doesn't have an income tax. Um, so it's not really a big deal here, the taxes. We have a sales tax the city has and the property tax.
Okay.
But people living in the villages, there's no sales tax, I don't think, in the municipalities. So what drives a lot of Alaskan politics talk is the so-called PFD, that's the permanent fund dividend, because oil riches were put into a fund,
Okay.
a permanent fund, which is then reinvested, and the investments are, that was the idea, to save something for a rainy day. And every year, Alaskans um, get a share of the earnings of that fund.
Okay.
So those things were great. when the oil was flowing, and we could tax the get a lot of taxes from oil to pay for state services. But since the oil kind of the price decreased, now the state finds itself hurting for money to pay for services.
Okay.
And so they're kind of every year the debate since 2010, 2009 is like, do we dip into the permanent fund and take money from that to pay for state services? So that's always like a huge discussion because everyone wants their permanent fund, right?
Yeah.
So the dividend, I should say. So that's a big deal. And then housing is a very, very big deal, and that's like everywhere. You cannot find good housing. You have to, and that drives up the assessment rates
Okay.
for houses that do sell,
Mhm.
and that, in my opinion, just exacerbates the whole housing situation because the higher the value, the less people can afford it, and those who can, there will always be those people who can buy a house that's maybe just worth 150. They put down 300 because there's just such a demand for very scarce housing. So we have solved that in a way for us because we have a hard time recruiting reporters from our community, unfortunately. So I have to bring in reporters from the lower 48,
Okay.
and we had to build our own housing.
I see.
So we have 2 houses for reporters, which, of course, that's quite a investment for
It is.
our paper. But we had, yeah. So what am I gonna do?
No, it's actually very innovative for you to be doing that. But now tell me a little bit about your staff. How many people do you have working to cover these kinds of issues?
Yeah. So we have a um, advertising manager who's married to me. So I give him housing.
Good for you. That's kind of you. Yes.
So then we have a full-time super reporter here. She's right next door. Yep, we actually bought a cabin, had it moved from out of town to here, totally refurbished, remodeled, put in everything new. So that's where she and her husband live in now. And then I'm currently looking for a second reporter
Okay.
who we have housing for.
Okay.
And then we have a distribution crew who they live here, so they're doing this part-time just on a Wednesday when the paper comes off the plane. And then we have our typesetter, or she used to be typesetter, that now it's recording court information, trooper beat. So she's collecting material for us and typing
Okay.
stuff still for us. And she's been with us for 30 years now,
Oh,
Gloria.
wow.
Yes. So I'm really lucky to have her still around. And um, then we have a freelancer who, reports on the fun, like the drama club play at the school, things that are, we don't get around to do, but that are still important for this community. And she does some sport reporting too. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And what about the business side? How are you managing to pay the bills? Is it mostly, are you relying on subscriptions or advertising, or some folks are doing special events? We're seeing all sorts of things happening.
Yeah, it's mostly advertising. We have not raised our subscription rates or our, it's still, the paper goes for 50 cents.
Okay.
We distribute it to all village stores here and have outlets in Anchorage as well. We, yeah, knock on wood, but we always have this uphill fight of, public notices. Like, people are starting to advertise their events or their positions or their requests for proposals on social media, or we have a listserv here called Nome Announce.
Okay.
And that is not passing the legal test of what is a public notice. So we're constantly, knocking on doors saying like, no, you cannot do that. You cannot just put it on an obscure government website and hope people find it. That's not public notice. You're not serving the public doing that. You might be checking a box, but you're not serving the public. And we're all about service. I mean, at least that's what I tell my people here. It's like we're servicing this community here. We're not. It's okay. It's nice when we get awards, but we're not writing for awards. We're not writing for Pulitzers, whatever.
Yeah.
We serve these people, our community.
Yeah.
And so it's a mix of subscriptions, advertising, and paper sales.
Okay. All right. And as far as delivery, is it only to the stores, or is it home delivery or via mail or anything like that?
It's a mix. So we have no home delivery. So our cycle is Monday, Tuesdays are deadline days. We put the paper together here in Nome. Then we put it on a cloud, and the printer in Anchorage, again 1,000 miles south, is printing it and on Wednesday mornings, and then puts most of the papers on the plane to Nome.
Okay.
And every Wednesday, you hope the planes are flying and the weather's good and no volcanoes are breaking, like spewing ash in the air. And so, there's a lot of millions of parts that move to get papers here. And then the papers get here, and our distribution crew pick them up from the airport, take them to a different terminal, some of them to the village store. So Gamble gets 50, Savunga gets 50, Elam gets 30. So they wrap them up and put them on a bush plane, and the rest goes to the Nome stores and here to the Nome Nugget for sale. And the another part is not leaving Anchorage, is going directly from the printer to a mailing service, and they imprint the subscribers on the paper and send them out from there.
Okay.
So that they don't have to come here to know.
Yeah.
Just to be flown back to down south.
All right. Got it. So given how complicated all of that is, how important is your website to people? Or do they not really log on? I don't know what internet access is like there.
Yeah. Well, it improved. We're now connected to a fiber optic cable that runs actually from London down to Tokyo, and they built a spur to Nome, and I think Reykjavik, and I want to say one more community, but I'm not sure. So we got into that broadband action, which improved it, but again, the communities around us, they have fickle communication services.
I would think so. Yeah.
On end or weeks on end, we go without even being able to call Little Diomede, which is right smack in the middle of the Bering Strait.
Okay.
And 2 miles away from Big Diomede, which is Russian. So they're in the most extreme spot on Earth, I think. So there's very little communication going on. And then now there's, Starlink, where they can actually set up those little satellites or, antennas. And that seems to be working quite well. So but it's not like in the lower 48 where you have like you're glued to, well, people are already glued to their phones, but it's, people still like paper.
Got it.
Where's my paper?
Got it.
Here, this week's paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still, people still clip photos of their kids out and put them on the refrigerator. And so I do think that a lot of people outside of Nome, we have a lot of those subscribers who read the Nugget online.
Okay.
But these regional, you know, our readers in the region, I think, still rely heavily on the paper.
I see.
Yeah.
It's very interesting to, to see how you operate versus kind of what's status quo here in the lower 48. There's so many things we take for granted.
Yeah, like what?
Well, that people would have much more readily accessible broadband.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And it would be reliable. And I don't know of anyone who has the issue of printing so far away and having to fly it back, and have to worry about the weather delaying, to miss a deadline like that.
Yeah, so we only have one airline like that has jet service to Nome. It's Alaska Airlines.
Okay.
And we're pretty much at the mercy of if they load up the paper on their flights or not. And we have one champion at Alaska Airlines in the cargo office, and if she's not there, it's I'm calling, and where are they? And oh, they will be there on Saturday. I'm like, no, it's Wednesday. They gotta be, put them on the plane. That's it's newspapers. On Saturday, it's not news anymore. So I fight a lot of my uphill battles with people who just don't care.
Yeah, it's amazing how so much of an organization can come down to one person, right? Whether or not they're working that day or not. But, I think you gave us really a great overview of what's happening there. I have one final question for you, which is, given all of this, just how convoluted everything is and how hard it is to attract journalists there, and the weather and the lifestyle and all of that, and the stress of putting out a weekly newspaper, because that's not easy. Why do you do it?
Well, why not? Well, I've been a reporter all my life.
Okay.
I think I'm supposed to do that. And I came to Nome in 2002. Just as two reporters were leaving here.
Okay.
The owner then, she was like this, and she's like, okay, can you start like right now? Oh, sure, okay. So I grew really fond of the Nome Nugget and what we all do here, what we all achieve, and what this whole Nugget is all about in terms of serving a readership that otherwise maybe wouldn't have the context that we provide to news, because we don't have any national news or any, people can pick that up elsewhere. We're really reporting on news that are affecting people's lives right here. So not like AP, I'm not writing for outside. I'm writing for what we need to know, and that's a different viewpoint than reporting for for an audience in lower 48, where I have to start explaining what subsistence means or what this and that means. So we have a different view. I'm looking at the government, or like our senators, our state representatives, and saying, so what are you doing in response to what we are seeing here?
Okay.
What's the course of action? So, okay, Russia invaded Ukraine. We're like 2 miles away from Russia. What's the plan here? I yet have to hear it.
Yeah.
So, people we're asking questions on behalf of our population here. And nobody else would do that. No Anchorage Daily News does that. Nobody else will do that for us. So that keeps me going. Because we do important work, I think.
Okay.
And then when the editor of the paper she was the paper was owned by a single lady when I got here, and she had owned the paper for 34 years.
Okay.
And just, kept it going. She had a pretty good staff because I think in the 90s and early 2000s, that was newspapers were a healthy business still.
Yeah.
And she had quite some staff. I mean, there was a lot of people jumping around here.
Okay.
We don't have that now.
Yeah.
So when she died in 2016, she just basically told me to keep it going.
Oh, wow.
What do?
Yeah.
You're promising like somebody that knew for years and who's your boss and grew. She was like the grandma to my child. That was part of the Nugget family.
I see.
And she tells you to keep it going. I'm like, okay, then I guess that's what we're gonna do. So
Wow.
we'll keep it going.
Okay. Is there anything you wanted to talk about that I didn't ask you?
That's always my line. No. Well, it's it's not easy because there's so little resources that we have here, especially finding out if you're doing the right thing, and you're not supposed to doubt yourself as the editor and publisher. You know what you're doing, and we do, but there's always room for improvement, and sometimes it's just hard enough to get through a news cycle and really thinking, did I really hit it all, or what am I missing? What else can we report on? So I think it's sometimes okay to realize that you cannot do more with less.
Right.
And that has taken some pressure off, and that actually lets you then do more if you don't have to think about what you're missing. So we just do your best and hope you inspire people along the way, and hope that your crew understands the importance of what we're doing. We're not doing this for money. We're not doing this for fame. We're just doing this because I strongly believe that we need a healthy, independent press to, keep this democracy somehow alive.
The Fair Media Council is a 501c3 nonprofit organization advocating for quality news and working to create a media-savvy society. For more information about the Fair Media Council and upcoming Fast Chat shows, check out fairmediacouncil.org.